Hey everybody, I want to show you some more complex ways to join and merge shapes in Adobe Illustrator using the Shape Builder tool and the Pathfinder. So shapes are the building blocks of any object you draw in Illustrator, and as you build up more complex artwork, it becomes necessary to cut, carve, and resize things using the Shape Builder or the Pathfinder tool. So let's see what that does. A lot of times when we're drawing, what we actually want to do is use basic shapes to build up our objects, and then we want to find ways to sculpt or cut or remove areas of shapes on our page as opposed to trying to draw them from scratch. So let's say I wanted to cut a piece out of this this box that I've drawn on my page, and let's say I want a rounded opening on one side. Well, what I could do is draw a shape of a circle, and then using the Shape Builder tool, I could do different combinations of these shapes, either remove or add to make this work. So just to demonstrate this, notice how if I position this circle on the edge of the square, I'm being a little OCD, so I'm lining it up. Let's say I have that on the edge, but what I'm really going for is an opening on this side of the square. The circle really is meaningless. I just need it so that I can cut it from the other object. So let's use the Shape Builder and see what happens. So I'm going to select both objects. You have to do that first. Select both objects, switch to the Shape Builder tool. That's the one that has the couple circles and an arrow on it. And watch how just hovering your cursor over the objects, it interacts with the shapes. And it's hard to see, but there is a little plus symbol on the edge of that cursor that lets you know what kind of interaction it's going to create. So plus means it's going to add. So if I just clicked and dragged with my cursor through those pieces, it would join them. It would add them together into a solid shape because it had the add symbol on it. Instead, if I press the Option or the Alt key on my PC and I drag through those shapes, I get the minus symbol, and when I let go of the mouse, it will actually remove them. So this is a pretty handy way to sculpt things. I can think of a number of situations where you might want to make a complicated shape interaction, but the quickest and easiest way to do it would be the Shape Builder. Let's say, for example, I'm going to go ahead and delete these. Let's say I wanted to draw a very basic logo, and I had a circle on my page, and I wanted to have, like, let's say, a letter cut out of the middle of that circle. So let's say I switch over to my type tool and I type the letter A. It's pretty small, so I'm going to scale it up. And I'm going to go for like a bolder letter A. Doesn't really matter what the letter is, but I'm making it bolder and thicker, and I'm scaling it up. And I'm going to position it so that it bleeds off the edge of this circle. I want it to look the right size to kind of scale and overlap the edge of that circle. All right, so simplest way to get these to join would be just to color that letter white, and then I see through it and I see the shape appear behind it. But if I actually want this shape to interact, let's say I brought this over to the side, and you can see if I change that to white, I'm not actually cutting that shape, even though it looks like I am. I'm just coloring it so it appears white on a white background, so it looks cut out, but it's not really cut out. So I have to do a couple things here to be able to make this letter A interact using the Shape Builder tool. And so first things first, I need to convert the letter into a workable shape. So I'm going to select the A symbol, go to the Type menu, and I'm going to use an option called Create Outlines. Now what that does is it takes any letter and it converts it into a solid shape. So now I no longer have a type or editable letter. I have a vector shape with vector outlines. Another way to show that would be using the outline view. Notice how right now it's a letter, and if I go to the type menu and I go create outlines, say okay. Okay, back to the preview. Type create outlines. Okay, now I'll go to outline view. You'll see that it became an outline shape, not a letter anymore. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can select both shapes and now use Shape Builder to do my shape combination. So I want to remove the white area. So I press Option or Alt on my keyboard, and I carefully drag through the white space on the letter. I don't want to accidentally drag into the pink because that'll delete it. I want to make sure that I'm only dragging through the white area of the interlocking logo to leave myself with the remaining residual piece. So there we've got that little A symbol. Pretty nifty. All right, now let's try something else. When we need to do more complex shape combinations, we have something called the shape art, the Pathfinder. So I'm going to move these off the side and get into the Pathfinder tool and show you what that does. So in a similar way, I need to start with two shapes to make an interaction. So I'm going to start with this shape, and then I'm going to change to a star. And I'm going to color it a different color so you can see it. There are two distinct shapes overlapping one another. Next step is to go to the window menu and reveal the Pathfinder palette. So go to Pathfinder, and I'm going to go ahead and detach it and bring it over a little bit closer so we can see what it's actually going to do to this shape combination. And again, I'm being OCD. So, okay. What I want to do is see what kind of combinations are available in the Pathfinder tool. And I'm going to kind of apply one, show what it does, undo it, and go back and forth a few times to kind of explain what's going on. So here, let's do the first Pathfinder, and the shape mode that it has on the list is Unite. So what's that going to do? That's going to merge those two shapes into one, kind of like the shape builder, and look how it adopted the color of the star, the top shape. So that's what Unite does. It'll combine any combination of shapes. So I could have a dozen shapes piled on top of each other, and that's what it's going to do. It's going to merge them. Okay, what does minus front do? Might do what you think. It's going to cut away the star because the star happens to be the topmost shape, and there it cuts it out, just like the shape builder did. Next one, intersect. So this one's kind of cool. What it's going to do is anywhere that the shapes connect inside each other, it's going to preserve, and everything else is going to remove. So notice how it went from having the square to the outline points of the star, and it left us with just the middle piece. So that's really handy, especially when you're trying to carve up a complicated shape that might be made out of something like a star or some other detailed pattern. If you can draw a circle or a symmetrical shape over the top of it, it's a real quick way to trim off the edges and leave yourself with the remaining piece. The next one is going to be exclude, and that's going to do the opposite. It's going to punch a hole. So it took all those pieces and punched a hole. So now you'll see that the middle area, wherever they overlapped, is like a donut hole cut through the bottom object. So another way to look at that one might be like the letter O. So let's say we have two circles. Draw a second one on top, different color. And I actually want to punch a hole between this so that that red dot actually becomes a window through the shape. So I'll do exclude. You'll see how now that's a donut hole between the middle of that circle shape. So that's what exclude does. All right, I'm gonna leave that off to the side. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to the star and the rectangle here and try the next row of Pathfinder options. Let's do the next one, which is called divide. Now when you click divide, at first glance, it doesn't look like it did anything, but it actually did. What it did was it cut the shapes apart from each other wherever they're overlapping. And the way to see that is to switch to your direct selection tool and click on each piece and kind of pull it apart. And you can see that wherever it overlapped, it became a cutaway piece. So it just carves things along vector lines and makes separate shapes. That's what Unite does. The interesting thing about Unite, though, is when it does it, it leaves the object grouped together. So you don't actually see the separate pieces unless you take it apart using the direct selection tool. All right, so let's back up to before. Now let's try the next one. Trim. See what happens with trim. So trim didn't look like it did much either. The stroke line disappeared. Part of that is because of these shape interactions. But what trim did was similar to like minus front or minus back. It cut a hole, but it left the original object there. So the star cut through the shape underneath, similar to divide, but it didn't cut it along the edges of the vector lines. It just made a stamp. It just punched through it, but left you with the additional objects. Now, to do the next one, we're going to need to make a couple more copies. So I'm going to take these shapes and just kind of overlap them a little bit so they become just kind of like a little cluster. And you need to have multiple objects to see what this next grouping does. Again, now I'm going to select all of them together, this random weird cluster of shapes. And the next one is merge. Now what merge is going to do is any piece, segment, or line that overlaps, it's going to join, and it's going to join those objects that share the same color. Everything else is going to be flattened. So it takes this cluster of really complex vector lines and it simplifies them. And I'll do kind of a before and after here. Here's before. You can see the crisscross of all the vector lines, and after. Notice how it cleaned it up, and anywhere that they were touching and overlapping, the same colors were joined together. And let me use my magic wand. I'll magic wand the yellow color, and you'll see that I can move that separate from those other pieces. You can see how they were all joined in a unique way. All right, back to where we started. Now let's do the next one. This is crop. So here it took the star, the background shape, and it cropped them to wherever they overlapped. Next one is outline, which instead of creating combined shapes, it actually, similar to divide, made divided vector shaped lines. So they're cut. And then last but not least, minus back, hidden away over here by itself. Minus back, there it is. So fun with shapes, messing around with combinations. A good way to do it, use Shape Builder, use Pathfinder. That's really going to be helpful when you're trying to make really more complex, unified shapes out of other pieces. All right, so hope that helps. Have fun with that. See you next time.